I was just like you. Just another American struggling to live. All I wanted was to have a family. But that felt more and more impossible because every day, things get more and more expensive. Why is this happening? I had no idea that question would take me to 44 people around the world.
My grandparents, they could own a house and a summer house, have a car, 3 kids, and save money for the future on one income at the age of 30. And now we're seeing an entire generation priced out of the housing market. We now need 2 incomes to rent an apartment.
I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to afford a house. I don't know how I'm going to be able to put food on the table for my family because of the rising costs. It is becoming harder and harder for us to get by. We're having to spend more time working. We're not able to meet our children's needs, our partner's needs, our own needs. Monetary stress is the #1 stressor globally. If we're inside our mum's womb and our mum is feeling immense stress, that's going to impact the baby's immune system, their nervous system. So before we've even entered this world, we're already being impacted by money.
It's like a rat race. Wake up really early in the morning, go to work, spend 9 to 14 hours a day. It's all survival. Inflation equals great depression or like great anxiety.
Fewer and fewer people are having children. Instead, we can have a cat and a houseplant.
We're feeling this constant pressure, rising prices, rising cost of living that is just slowly chipping away at us. Inflation, it leads to all of these issues at which we face in society.
Life is better now than 50 years ago in the sense that we have more technology to our disposal. Life is worse now in the sense that there is less prosperity. I don't believe inflation is going to stop. Most people in the world actually live with double-digit inflation.
Housing costs alone, now it's like triple or quadruple the price, from just a few years ago, which is ridiculous. Like, how do people manage?
Instead of having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I might just have breakfast and lunch. And then the second day, I might just decide to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a treat. But the next day, it's just breakfast. You have to cut back because you need to, make it to next week.
The country has to buy more medication to sustain more people having diabetes because they cannot afford to have a balanced diet. And children, when a child is malnourished, it affects their intellectual, physical, psychological development. And they go to school and you wonder why they cannot learn.
I don't see where cost of living is going to decrease. Like, that's never the trajectory. It's always up and up and up and up.
Inflation, it just keeps going up. Most persons, they have to resort to 2 jobs, 3 jobs.
The smiles aren't there like they used to be because they don't see an end to it. They will never expect it to stop. They will never expect it to slow down. As a matter of fact, they only expect it to speed up. It demoralizes society.
I am not very hopeful that things will improve. I feel sad to feel so negative about it. And deep down, I'm hoping that I am wrong.
There's no hope for it getting better.
It is like a fight in a war, based on the impact that it is likely to have on our children, on ourselves, on the society on our whole.
We no longer see ourselves as people. We're just working day to day. We'll never be able to say, at the end of the day, that's not living. It's just surviving.
That's what we're going to start seeing in the United States.
Jamaica frightened me because I could see the US trending in this direction, especially if things keep getting more expensive. I hoped this was as bad as inflation can get, but I was wrong.
Remember when you went out with only 5 pesos in your wallet, and that would get you a taxi, and that will get you a soda, and that will get you a ticket for the club. And now, of course, that's 10,000 pesos.
A couple of years ago, I had my kids in for dinner. I spent 500 pesos. A month or 2 months later, I had kids for dinner and I spent 1,000 pesos. Now, 1,000 pesos wouldn't buy, I don't know, 2 cartons of yogurt.
In 2000, the country had a huge crisis. People lost everything. It was violent. If you are middle class, you become poor.
They can't escape inflation. You have to be able to save.
You end up begging for the government to provide you assistance. A lot of people rely on the government providing them a check.
You have full cities that 80-85% works from government. You might think that supporting people, yes, is a good thing. I mean, I'm hungry, give me food, and that's okay. In the long term, you depend on someone giving you food. You become the guy that's a good guy that's giving me the food.
If inflation goes like hyperinflation, prices disappear, and people won't get food. I think that's possible next year.
Argentina was terrifying because, again, I could see the US trending in this direction. Look at the number of homeless people. Look at the number of government employees. It was awful to imagine living through such chaos. But it turns out, inflation doesn't stop here either.
I was born in Venezuela. My salary was $800. The same year, my salary went to $200. It's exactly like you try to take water in your hands. It's like disappearing in front of your eyes.
The government goes into panic mode. You're not allowed to charge more than X for milk and eggs.
Hugo Chavez, at that time, he expropriated many companies that produce food. They stopped working. So we weren't able to produce our own food. It's so hard to find food, even if you have the money.
When I realized that Venezuela was a dictatorship, I decided to leave.
Hyperinflation is the cause of all of the major totalitarian regime development historically. The real story of the Weimar was not Kristallnacht. The real story of the Weimar was the hyperinflation.
The inflation of the 1920s was a significant factor that led to World War II.
In 1920, after World War I, Germany was still the third largest economy in the world. By 1924, their currency had hyperinflated to more than 4 billion%. Students that were going to university abroad, they were able to buy entire blocks worth of property.
People felt like they were being stripped naked. All the antiques were being bought up. Everything that was loose was being sold to other parts of the world. People were so poor that prostitution ran wild, debauchery and gambling. That led to a feeling that something big needed to change. We need to have a fresh start and do something radical.
I finally found how inflation ends, in desperation and destruction. But why is this happening? What causes inflation?
The only reason why things get more expensive is because money is being printed.
It's printed by the central bank in order to give it to the government, and then government spends that money.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money.
And there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. We will do whatever we need to do to make sure that there's enough cash.
The government prints a lot of money, and it has been printing a lot of money for so many years. The only thing we get out of that is very, very high levels of inflation.
There's so much money going around that things just go up in price because more money's fighting to get these items.
The name dollar really comes from gold currency.
When we were on the gold standard, we had a 1-to-1 ratio of paper to gold.
And I could always redeem those coins from the banks.
When we were on the gold standard, those are the times in history when we had the most innovation.
Quality of life was very, very good. Even though the technology was not as advanced, the actual quality of goods tended to be better. People thought about building things to last. 1971, the redeemability was abolished.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. What does it mean for you? Your dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today.
And they could all of a sudden produce more bills, but there was no more gold. That is how they ruined the gold standard.
It still didn't make sense to me. If inflation causes so much damage, and if it's all simply due to money being printed, then why do they keep printing it?
To give government the economic power to enforce what they believe is right, which seems to be infinite wars.
War is a means by which politicians, bankers, and corporate executives enrich themselves directly at the expense of the entire population. Because every new dollar that is created for the sake of war causes inflation. And then that new money finds its way into the bank accounts of the corporations. It really is that simple. There's always an enemy. It's always critical that we destroy them. And always in retrospect, do we look back and go, well, that was stupid. You shouldn't be able to infinitely fund weapons of death beyond the necessity of a given circumstance. But when you can print the money, they're just going to keep producing bigger and bigger bombs, more insidious biological weapons, more damaging chemical weapons. These weapons are just going to get increasingly dangerous. And when something exists, it's very hard to not use it. I fear for my life, the lives of my loved ones, and the future of our species.
The main problem with humans controlling the money supply, it has so many unintended consequences that it's impossible for any group of individuals to fully understand.
Money is the blood of the economy. If the money is broken, the economy starts cheapening. Companies are incentivized to make foods that are ever more cheap rather than give people nutritional value. There are massive side effects.
Our number one cost is healthcare. The devaluation of our dollar has basically devalued our health. Food has changed dramatically in 50 years.
Farming is now big business. Farming is now science. We're going to use more chemicals. We're going to use biotechnology.
The way I was raised, we had a freezer full of beef, the local bacon, local eggs, butter, and milk. The Nixon administration told all farmers and ranchers in America, you're going to go big or go home.
It was a controversial plan, and it involved big government involvement in agriculture.
The United States government was able to say, okay, we're going to pay you so much money to grow these crops. And so we went into factory farming. We started relying more on science than biology. Engineering of genetically modified seeds, new forms of fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides. Each one of those destroyed our soil in the United States. Too much science and not enough biology and care. The United States government is feeding millions upon millions of people. But is it food? No. There's so many different additives into food now. It's not something that comes locally anymore. It's highly processed, and it has a long, long journey before it really does end up at your table. If you look at the health of a nation right now, it's an epidemic. All the way from children, all the way to senior citizens, we're all suffering from the same metabolic diseases that were not here 50 to 60 years ago. Why is this happening? We changed our food system after we changed our money system.
As a government, it is dangerous to have high inflation. You have riots, or you get voted out of office. So you do whatever you can to fight that. And that was sort of the whole point of colonialism: get cheap labor and cheap commodities and goods from over there to feed into our system so that we can keep prices down and we can keep inflation down over here. Foreign aid is taking old school colonialism done in the form of lending. Today, we're not sending a warship. We are lending the rulers a lot of money in exchange for them restructuring their country and society and economy in a way that benefits us to make what we want instead of what they need. We were trained to believe in the West, in America and Europe, was that we were helping these countries with assistance and aid. We're not. We're stealing from them. Every year we steal trillions of dollars of capital from poor countries.
Foreign aid in the 1980s was largely unquestioned. But the way I looked at things, there isn't a single country in the developed world that got rich by being given aid. The first big book that I really did was called Lords of Poverty. And in this, I was able to unfold all the horrors that I had seen surrounding foreign aid. Somalia today is an example, a proof of the fact that aid doesn't work. The part of Somalia that's around Mogadishu is a complete mess. Total disaster, bullets flying down the streets. You risk your life every minute of the day, absolute chaos. But in the north of Somalia, there's what is known as the Somaliland Republic, and that is functioning incredibly well. Now, the difference between these two bits of what used to be one country, the Somaliland Republic doesn't receive a cent of foreign aid, and the Somaliland Republic is doing really well. And the rest of the country is in a complete disastrous mess.
The IMF has absolutely favored tyrannical rulers. The laundry list of all of them is staggering. It's for a reason. They don't have to deal with protests or Supreme Courts or, labor rights movements. Those things can just get crushed and they can just deal directly with the dictator. That's way easier for them.
Foreign aid was created to keep countries which might otherwise become revolutionary, to keep them quiet. Therefore, the big corporations can stay big corporations. They can carry on making billions and trillions of dollars in profits. They can carry on exploiting the developing countries because why? Oh, we're giving you aid. The world does not give the poor countries a chance anymore. They're dominated.
In the Philippines during Ferdinand Marcos, horrible corrupt dictator who killed all kinds of people. So he borrowed $28 billion. So the Filipinos had to pay off these huge interest payments. They didn't consent to any of that borrowing. The year after they kicked him out, the Filipinos, it was something like 40 or 50% of all of the national revenue that year had to go towards paying back debt. And just think about what that means for the youth, the future, investing in kids, investing in healthcare, investing in anything that makes the nation healthy is not available because it's being used to pay back the debt that some dictator borrowed. And same thing in Nigeria. We're talking 50, 60, 70 plus countries in this debt trap. A lot of what we have here in this country is because of hard work and brilliance and Western civilization values. Absolutely, but it's also due to the fact that we've screwed over poor people in other countries for a very long time. For all the inflation you see in the West over the last 100 years, it's been relatively low. It would be way higher if we weren't exploiting all these other countries.
If you have the power to print money, you can stimulate bad behavior and punish good behavior. If all of a sudden the government comes along and says, hey, for every person who tests positive on COVID, we're going to give you this much money, well, then there's a huge incentive to have more positive counts. Maybe you're a worse hospital that in a free market would actually make less money, but all of a sudden the hospital that's worse, that has more bad outcomes, they get more subsidies. So in a way, it's very perverse.
The medical establishment told us, someone gets COVID, you don't do anything for them. You send them to the hospital. This is the only infectious disease in the history of mankind where physicians have been told, do not treat early. So that didn't make sense. I said, fuck it, I'm going to do it, no matter what happens. My wife Ann and I probably treated 1,000 people. I'm sure we prevented some deaths. We had some pretty sick people with high risk, obese, diabetics, a lot of elderly people. Anybody that we treated from a relatively early stage did not die. I worked for a large healthcare corporation and got fired. This was basically a no-no because the government gave them incentives to give vaccines, ventilators, and they also gave them incentives to diagnose as COVID deaths. They were just making money hand over fist. I just basically was a rebel, and they had to get rid of the rebel. It was a stressful time. It was probably the most stressful time in my life. You couldn't say what you felt because there were going to be significant negative repercussions.
Yeah, physicians who spread misinformation about the COVID vaccine could have their license to practice medicine suspended or revoked.
And people were dying needlessly.
I finally saw the whole picture. All of this printing, all of this spending, all of this suffering is why I can't afford to have a family. How long can they keep doing this?
Governments don't tend to actually declare bankruptcy. They just implicitly do it by printing insane amounts of money.
The government spends more money than it takes in. The government borrows to make up the difference.
The underlying debt is getting bigger and bigger, and the interest on that debt is bigger and bigger. By the end of this decade, the interest will be greater than revenue coming in from taxes. And then the financial system and the stability of the country has a huge problem.
The economy has been built around this illusion that we can sort of keep doing this.
Inflation is a major threat. It's completely out of our control. We are likely to have hyperinflation.
Because this is an event that we've never witnessed in our life, it seems so radically impossible to come.
Civilizations have experienced this throughout time. It happens over and over again.
Out of the 237 fiat currencies that have came into existence, there has never been a single one that didn't die an early death in hyperinflation. There is no conceivable way to pay back the amount of debt that we have, and that will lead to hyperinflation. It's just a matter of when is it coming.
If hyperinflation is coming, and life will get much worse, do I even want to have a family? Do I want to bring children into this world if they're going to suffer even more than me? This was rock bottom. This was hopeless. And all of this due to money being printed. And this was the aha moment. What if money couldn't be printed?
You could not produce what the U.S. military-industrial complex produces on an annual basis if you didn't have the ability to print money. What you end up with is only what you need. Well, in the case of war, that means smaller bombs.
They definitely would have been much less powerful. They couldn't have just printed money to incentivize people to do things that they wanted to do. The pandemic would have been treated completely differently. I think you would have had more doctors that would have seen the light, not have been fearful of the government. They would have researched a lot more and not had someone telling them how they needed to practice medicine.
Now is the time to do what you're told.
We would have seen more physicians controlling the narrative as opposed to the regulatory agencies in the government. And I think lives would have been saved.
If we actually fed a true balanced diet, we would be the most powerful, healthiest nation that has ever existed on this planet.
There'll be less of an ability to bail out bad decisions. And that means equally bailing out bad decisions made by financial corporations in the West as it does bad decisions made by dictators.
There would be a recognition that the present system we have doesn't work, and that recognition would be worldwide. We're already seeing it with people voting with their feet in the form of migration that's taking place. These are all people, just human beings, just like you and I. They're seeking to improve their lives because their lives are really horrible and awful in the place that they live. So we would need to make a fairer world where people didn't want to migrate from the country they live in necessarily. If you stopped aid altogether, it would happen soon enough. It would happen. It would happen.
Nothing else has to change for the average person to feel a complete improvement in their life by just prices not going up anymore.
It's hard even to imagine living without inflation and thinking of prices that don't go up all the time. It would be nice to be able to plan, yeah.
Your whole outlook on life, I think, is different. And if you know that, okay, I buy milk today and it's $1 and I come back next week and next year and it's still $1, phew, wow, that's great.
That kind of economic environment alone would lead to unprecedented levels of prosperity, to levels never before imagined on Earth.
That's a utopian world, isn't it? I don't know if it exists, but it would be great.
A life with no more inflation does sound like a utopia, especially since every money in human history has been printed to death. We've never had a money that was impossible to print, but we've had so many technological advances recently. Could it be possible now?
Inflation problem is a consequence of money printing. If you have a currency with a fixed supply, then you would avoid inflation.
There will only be 21 million Bitcoins, with each Bitcoin being divisible by 100 million pieces.
The smallest part is called a Satoshi, so 100 million Satoshi in one Bitcoin.
If there wasn't Bitcoin, I would be depressed. What could we use to fight inflation and money printing from governments? Previously, there was no way to have a decentralized ledger.
The money we're working with now is already a ledger. It's a centralized ledger,
which is controlled by the central bank, which in our world here in the US is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve meets every 6 weeks through something called the Federal Open Market Committee, and they decide really on the size of the money supply.
Bitcoin is different. Everybody can have the full history of Bitcoin's ledger.
This is running a node, which is hosting the entire history of all of the Bitcoin transactions that have ever happened, as well as a copy of the rules that govern the network.
You can verify that there's only 21 million coins. There will never be more of them. There is no CEO of Bitcoin. There is no central repository that can be shut down. It is not one computer. It is hundreds of thousands of computers. They keep adding entries every 10 minutes.
It's a technical marvel. It's way better than bank. With bank, you need to sign a bunch of papers. With Bitcoin, all you need is to download Bitcoin wallet.
Once you show them how easy it is to use Bitcoin, they can see actually how Bitcoin can be useful in their daily life.
My dad and my mom, they both in the United States, and they sent the money to me. Then I received that, like a 7 or 9 digit number. Then you have to go to the bank. I work Monday to Friday. Saturdays, banks are open only from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. You arrive at the bank at 7 a.m. There's already like 20 people waiting in line. If you get in time, then you get in time. If not, then you have to wait until another week. Sometimes they don't have the money and they just tell you came back tomorrow. They still don't have it. They ask a lot of questions. Where is the money coming from? Who is sending it? what do you do? What is he doing? You got to pay a fee, $10, maybe $15. That's maybe like a whole day of work here, though. Yeah, it actually is. Nowadays, I just do it from my home through Bitcoin. My dad, he sent it to me. You can pay anything with Bitcoin nowadays. You can pay the energy before you go to the banks. You have to wait in line. Nowadays, I just get my phone, I just pay in Bitcoin, and I'm done.
Bitcoin came here almost 4 years ago.
We'd been doing a number of things in the community, really trying to keep kids from joining the gangs. That was a huge issue at that time. We had the idea to hey, we're paying these kids to clean the river, giving them stipends for their grades. Let's start doing that in Bitcoin. El Salvador's never had a culture of saving. Death was so common and life was kind of fleeting, and so people kind of just spent it as fast as they got it. But we saw with Bitcoin for the first time, instead of buying that extra Coca-Cola or that trinket, they started saving money. So that was one of the first things we saw, and we really didn't expect that. This started to take hold. Articles were being written, film crews were coming down. Then the Bitcoin tourism really started to develop. You have nice hotels popping up, nice homes. Now the roads are beautiful, there's sewer system in here. But even more important than that is just the look on people's faces. They now have excitement about the future, and they're proud to be Salvadoran.
People are dreaming for the first time. If you don't dream, you don't have any purpose in life to wake up every morning. Bitcoin is that collective dream for everyone around the world.
We hope that we can inspire other communities all over the world. If we were able to do it, I think that more countries and more cities can do it.
It's a solution to so many problems. It's way better than sending wire transfers.
We had a client and he was trying to buy this very expensive vase in France. It was like a $2 million vase. And his wire got stuck for no joke. It was over a month because they couldn't figure out where the funds came from, where he would be able to buy this ridiculously expensive vase in France. The bank has the ability to censor the Bitcoin, right? There isn't that centralized entity. The miners make sure that the transactions aren't censored. So you can literally sit in your bed at 1 a.m. and you can send $2 million wherever you want, and you can basically have a confirmation in 10 minutes that it was sent.
People that are mining Bitcoin, they're effectively trying to guess a number to get to be the person that adds those new transactions. These computers are trying to all at the same time compete in this lottery system to be the correct one to guess the correct number quickest. They're using a lot of energy. Why would anybody expend energy to do that? There's got to be a reward, and that reward comes in the form of newly created Bitcoin and transaction fees. Back in 2009, when Bitcoin started, the first miners would be rewarded with 50 new Bitcoin. Roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. Currently, people are earning 3.125 Bitcoin. In and around the year 2140, that reward will not be able to be cut in half any further. No new Bitcoin will be issued, and miners will subside only on transaction fees. This was kind of the fairest way, in my opinion, of distributing 21 million Bitcoin.
Okay, Bitcoin is super easy to use. But all this energy these miners are using, isn't that bad for the Earth?
Any place you drill for oil has something we call associated gas.
A lot of this gas, especially in North Dakota, is just flared because it's not economical for people to build the pipeline. It's wasted energy and it's not as environmentally friendly.
There's a handful of different types of products that come out of the flare. Methane, ethane, butane, propane. There's several more. When it's real windy out like it is today and you can see the flare blowing, you have the potential for some of that stuff to escape and not get fully burned off. It's damaging to all the wildlife and all the plants and everything around it.
They don't like just burning the gas. They wish there was better solutions. Until Bitcoin came around, there wasn't a great solution.
Those are mobile situations where we can bring generators out.
We can run that right into our generators. Methane, ethane, butane, propane. Those liquids are stripped out and that burns clean.
We can go hook right up and put miners right to work. And that energy is being used and that flare is dropped or if not gone.
I try to knock out this flare down to as low as we can get it.
So what we're doing is a net positive.
I grew up in this area my whole life since I was a little child. There's thousands of wells out here. Bitcoin mining is already playing a huge role out here, and we're really happy to have it out here.
We're so dependent on energy, and we kind of get this idea that energy is a bad thing. Energy is one of the biggest factors in life expectancies.
On the African continent, there's about 1 billion people that still don't have access to electricity today. We developed small hydropower stations in rural Kenya. We were producing power, but back in the day, only able to sell 40%. I got to know Erik, and I was talking to him about our challenge.
So we come in, we say, hey, listen, we'll take all that extra energy, and you're going to make money because of that. We'll bring our 20-foot container with like 130 miners in it. We turn it on, and all of a sudden, all the excess energy is not wasted anymore. It's actually going to use. In the evenings in villages in Africa, the customer usually comes online about 6 p.m. and to about 10 p.m. So you'll see a power spike needed. We automatically just turn off miners within 2 seconds, done, right? So it doesn't affect their grid. In fact, it stabilizes their grid. We win because we're mining Bitcoin. The power generation group wins because they're finally financially viable. And because of that, more people can be connected to electricity right away. I don't know if there's something that changes people's lives as drastically as that for the better.
I have 3 cattle. When using a machete for chopping that fodder, I would have used 2 or 3 hours to chop enough food for my cattle. But with this, 10 minutes. It is very fast.
Our kids have improved in their studies. They couldn't study well because we were using candles and kerosene, which will damage our eyes because of the smoke. And we also see the benefit because we charge our phones well, things have been perfect, a comfortable life.
Just like the villager who's getting electricity for the first time, and now they can envision a different future, same thing happens with energy providers. Immediately they can start thinking about the future, and they can start thinking about, oh, there's that other site. I've already done the assessment. I haven't been able to get the money because I haven't been able to prove that I will be able to pay it back. Now I can. All of a sudden, I'm financially viable as a business.
There's at least 90 locations that we've disqualified because there's simply not enough demand. So if now Bitcoin mining can come in and taking that initial 40, 50, 60% of the power, all of a sudden, our market has opened up to the entire African continent. We were deploying 20 megawatts All of a sudden, we can be developing 50, 100, 200, 300 megawatts. If we deploy 300 megawatts in rural Africa, then we're able to change and impact the lives between 7 and 10 million people will be reached. I think that's a dream worth going for.
I was blown away. I had no idea Bitcoin was reducing pollution and bringing electricity to people. Why haven't I heard about this before? Why have I only heard bad things about Bitcoin? And that got me thinking, what are some of the other bad things I've heard?
Fraud, anti-money laundering, tax avoidance, sex trafficking, those are real use cases, and you see it being used for hundreds, maybe $50 or $100 billion a year for that. So that
the thing about the money laundering, you can look at, here's the number was 20,000, I think, for U.S. dollars in money laundering, and it was 35 for how much is done with Bitcoin. So at this point, the dominant, I know, but the dominant,
know about.
Historically, the dominant currency for money laundering has been U.S.
I understand.
Okay.
All of the people that I work with are considered criminals in their countries. What's a criminal? There are lots of immoral laws, right, that need to be broken, that should be broken. The first things governments do when they want to go after somebody is freeze all their banking. Nicaragua, China, America, Canada.
We raised $24 million in 3 weeks, but the money was blocked.
The Ontario government freezing millions of dollars in donations to the trucker convoy. Question is this legal?
It wasn't our money. It was money for the guys who brought their trucks, who were sitting out there in the cold. The Bitcoin community globally, they put 17 Bitcoin in the hands of the truckers. And that still remains the only donation money that got to the truckers.
There's $8,000 of Bitcoin in there.
In here?
In there. As soon as the bank shut down, we had some big donors that were like, we need to get Bitcoin to these truckers. I'm not kidding you. It's yours.
That's insane, man. That's ridiculous.
No, that's fine. All right, dude, you came all the way here and you're saving our fucking country. That's ridiculous.
Holy shit, yeah.
That's the thank you from the Bitcoin community.
Holy fuck.
Much love, Chief.
It's red, man. That's great.
There you go. I'll see you around.
It was a great moment for Bitcoin.
My wife and I, we did not donate and we did not attend Ottawa, but we ended up in the crossfire somehow. The morning that the Emergencies Act declaration was invoked, I tried to sign into my online banking and I found a message that said, access to your accounts is not available at this time. While you're watching on TV, Canadians getting trampled under horses, getting beaten in the streets for disagreeing with the government. You're sitting there, no access to your funds, no access to your money. Don't know how you're going to put gas in your car, how you're going to pay your phone bill, your rent, buy the next load of groceries. We had put about 30% of our savings into Bitcoin at the time. It was the only money that we had access to. In spite of the federal government's actions, our Bitcoin was still a few clicks away.
It's really become a currency of human rights activism. They started to use Bitcoin to fund activism inside Togo when the dictator had frozen the bank accounts for everybody. Ukraine was a big one. Even during Putin's invasion in the early stages of the war, you were able to reach people regardless of whether the banking system was running or not. This is how you fund activism and research in Hong Kong these days. The Anti-Corruption Foundation, for years they relied on Bitcoin donations because the Russian government would freeze and mess around with and confiscate their funds. Well, they can't do that to Bitcoin. I've interviewed people who've escaped Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Burma, other places where they were able to bring their wealth with them through Bitcoin, which is a very powerful concept. I mean, I'm descended from people who fled Germany during World War II. They weren't able to bring their wealth with them. We only had analog savings technology, gold or a piece of art or something like, or a house. And those things aren't very mobile and they are hard to go through a border control. basically impossible. Bitcoin's different.
All you need to do is remember 12 words. Only you, the holder of that private key, can create a transaction to spend.
It's an incredible technology for refugees because it's permissionless. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you believe in or what gender you are, or what you look like, or what your faith or creed is. It just doesn't care. It's completely impossible to discriminate. That's one of the most powerful attributes it has, because our current financial system is so discriminatory. It cares very much who you are, what gender you are, what you believe in, what you say on the internet. Bitcoin is money that dictators and governments can't stop. So yeah, Bitcoin is for criminals, right?
There are people in Africa, they can't get any kind of ID because they don't even know when they're born. For them, Bitcoin will actually be the only financial system they can access. Bitcoin is literally the only hope they have.
I was in awe. I was starting to realize that everything I thought I knew about Bitcoin was completely backwards. But there is one thing I know to be true. Bitcoin is volatile. The price goes up and down and up and down. How could I ever feel comfortable investing in Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's actually not a great short-term savings vehicle. Let's say you bought in 2021 around $70,000 during the big boom, but then it went all the way down to $16,000, and that happened to be when your car engine broke down. Bitcoin would be a really poor short-term savings vehicle and really would put you at risk financially if you had to sell it. Bitcoin offers that long-term savings. Bitcoin is a money, and that it's therefore savings and not an investment. It's not synonymous with putting your money into a company or a bunch of different companies. It doesn't have all of the risks that Apple has. They have competitors, right? They have supply chain issues. Even the best stock, they still have the ability to issue more shares and dilute you out. We don't have the concept of long-term savings really at all prior to having something like Bitcoin. I mean, there's gold. However, you can continually mine gold. We don't actually even know what the supply of gold is. There's a significant cost of holding gold. It's hard to transport. It's hard to store. There's all sorts of reasons why maybe gold wouldn't necessarily be considered a long-term savings vehicle. And then there's real estate. Back when I lived in New York, foreign investors would come in and they would literally just buy like a penthouse and they would leave it vacant. But you still have to perform maintenance on it. You still have to pay property taxes on it. So there's ongoing costs to doing that. Whereas with Bitcoin, right, you could just buy it and you can have almost no ongoing costs, and you don't have to check on it, and you don't have to worry about replacing a boiler or fixing the AC or making sure the fridge is still running. There's an advantage there. Bitcoin looks quite appealing, and I think that Bitcoin will start taking over some of those assets. You just have to say to yourself, I don't need this for a really long period of time.
This made total sense. In the short term, Bitcoin looks risky. But if I look at it over the long term, it's gone up and up and up in price, faster than anything else in history, actually. But I know there are other cryptocurrencies. How do I know Bitcoin is the best one?
Bitcoin, it's open source, so anyone can create another copy of it, which has been done, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you make something that compares to Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is the largest network out there, and the next closest one is not even in the ballpark.
Anything new that comes out in any of these other coins, if it's actually a worthwhile property, can be implemented in Bitcoin, and very easily since the software is open source.
In my opinion, every single project that came after was a founder's grab to try to get rich for themselves under the guise that it was a similar system to Bitcoin.
People need to separate Bitcoin from crypto. That's probably the big lesson.
When people say crypto, they usually are referring to cryptocurrencies, but what they don't understand is that the substrate that makes all of that operable is actual cryptography. Because of the cryptography at the bottom, it is possible to actually memorize those words and cross a border with nobody knowing that you're carrying any money. More than 3,000 years ago, the Spartans had something called a skytail, which was essentially a stick that you wrap leather around, and only with that stick and it being actually to align correctly allow for you to decrypt what the message is. Very simple rudimentary encryption algorithm, but it gave the Spartans communications that were secure without having their messengers get captured and their messages corrupted.
This is carried out through all of the concourse of human history, then led into World War II, where the only thing that was more important to the United States than the development of a nuclear weapon was the development of a computer so that we could crack the Enigma code and beat the Germans. It was only in the early 2000s that we actually developed such strong and sophisticated encryption that now we could provably say that we had uncrackable mathematical ways to secure information. If you had all of the time and energy in our solar system and the most powerful supercomputer that had ever been created, you wouldn't be able to randomly guess these 12 words, try to randomly guess where a single atom actually is in the universe. That's about kind of 80% of the way towards what we're talking about. Winning the first crypto wars, I think, was really the most important thing, because that was the advancement where cryptography actually moved from being an explicit, private, secret military project that was in the hands only of nation states into it actually getting distributed to individuals all over the world.
The cypherpunk movement came together around the idea that a recent breakthrough in the field of cryptography was the key innovation for combating tyranny. In 1991, a software developer named Phil Zimmermann released the first relatively easy-to-use secret messaging system, so the U.S. Justice Department launched a 3-year criminal investigation of Zimmermann on the grounds that by making his software accessible outside the country, he could be guilty of exporting weapons under the Arms Control Act. In 1996, the Justice Department announced that it wouldn't pursue criminal charges against Phil Zimmermann, and major court victories came when 2 federal judges found that encryption is protected by the First Amendment.
Cypherpunks understood the value of cryptography. We need this to fight bad people. Cypherpunks are really activists that see cryptography and privacy as a tools to impact change in society.
Which is not to vote differently. It's not a matter of condemning what we have been doing. It's a matter of creating new technology that changes incentives, that changes the game.
Would you print your own money if you were given money printer in your bedroom? Yes? Yeah, especially if you promised during elections that you're going to solve all these people problems. How visionary cypherpunks were, it's literally get shivers whenever I think about it. Everything that cypherpunks have set out to do, encrypted messaging, digital cash. You can do all of that. The cypherpunk future is now. That's why I have zero worries about governments banning Bitcoin, because they can't shut down the internet. So if you can't shut down the internet, you can't shut down Bitcoin. It's not that countries haven't tried it. Those that do will only hurt themselves and their citizens. You look at China, the most technologically advanced when it comes to blocking and banning. They banned Bitcoin mining, and what did that do is they just handicapped themselves. Miners are still operating in China, but most of the miners have migrated to US. Do you really want to be in jurisdiction where your government wants an excuse to put you in jail or accuse you of crimes? No, gonna move away from that jurisdiction. At the end of the day, freedom always wins. People do not understand how profound this technology is by separating state and money. It's amazing.
Going into different war zones and war-torn areas of the world, everyone that I've met, including people that have lost their entire families to American munitions, they've met me openly and humbly and have never blamed me one bit for what my government's done. And to me, that gives me a deep ethical obligation to stop this war machine. To me, that's a horrific and disgusting aberration of human behavior. And I believe we can actually stop that from happening with Bitcoin.
The old system is going to dwindle eventually and collapse on itself. That leads to the sellers of energy or industrial materials or high-tech corporations or whatever, they're no longer going to demand dollars.
They want Bitcoin. That's what everyone's going to want. So you can't print the money anymore. You can, but nobody's going to accept it.
Everybody's on Bitcoin. I very much welcome that day. I very much welcome that day. Yeah.
Money is a great tool, but our problem is that we got to this point where we have money and we're trying to settle, but this money is controlled by governments, central banks, and they keep printing. So they force us to focus on acquiring more money so that we can live. You get in the place where you feel everyone is taking from you. It's because of the money printer. It forces you to run faster and faster and faster. And then you're doing that. You're not settling in your relationships. It's a terrible place to be in. I really see Bitcoin as a solution to that, so that we as individuals can settle to the point where you're at peace.
Bitcoin didn't exist, I'd be dead. It was a really deep and crushing depression. I saw the darkness and the nihilism of this place, and there was no conceivable way to solve this problem. This isn't about us just getting to save our money and wealth for the future. This truly is a spiritual thing to say, like, I will no longer have my wealth taken from me to finance wars that kill people that I have nothing to do with. I've had hundreds of people come to me and tell me that they've had similar spiritual awakening experiences. Bitcoin has really influenced and changed their perspective on the world, because they thought it was a dark, nihilistic, hateful place where truth and reasoning had no place anymore.
There's something about having Bitcoin that changes you, like a rainfall on a dry and cracked desert. We're not just alive, we're really living.
10 years from now, you won't recognize El Salvador. Bitcoin is a huge reason. It's what put El Salvador on the map.
Now I'm living on Bitcoin and I don't feel the inflation. I wasn't very hopeful until Bitcoin either. It changed me almost completely. It made me realize, okay, maybe I don't have to just live 6 months at a time. Maybe I can actually stop and slow down and reevaluate everything, like how I was living, how I was thinking, the relationships I was building. All of that changed. Bitcoin is not going to just change me, it's going to change everyone.
Bitcoin is a movement that makes you question a lot of your previous beliefs, and in my opinion makes you grow as a better person.
Bitcoin flips everything on its head. Life gets easier, our cost of living declines, which in the end gives us more time to look inwards, more time to determine who am I and how do I want to show up in this world? How do I want to commit my time to community or technology or my family? And so I think Bitcoin is profound because it allows us to show up more authentically. That's how humanity is going to succeed. That's how we're going to thrive.
Where there's no inflation, there's no struggle, people can live with dignity and they can really be themselves.
I was just like you, but these people and their stories helped me understand inflation. They helped me understand Bitcoin, and they gave me hope for the future. I made this film to share these stories because they helped me. And maybe they'll help you too.
We tend to get stuck in the patterns of thinking and the ways of behaving that we're born with and that we're brought up within. There is a tendency to select leaders, and yet the lunacy of these terribly bad leaders who are running the world could actually lead us into nuclear exchange, which would be the end of civilization as we know it. We need to migrate as a species beyond that level where we start actually thinking for ourselves.
This really is about how you are going to meet the inevitable hyperinflation that's coming and the political disharmony that's going to define the next decade in the United States. And with something like Bitcoin, you're actually really going to have an opportunity to protect yourself, your family, your savings. Each and every question that you have about Bitcoin has been answered in a reasonable way, but you're going to really need to seek it out and be curious about it. You can and will learn how these tools work. You must take that responsibility on for yourself.
At this point, so many people have seen that Bitcoin is good. You need to find the voice that speaks to you.
Inevitably, you're going to end up relying on some people to feed you information, but it's still your responsibility to suss out who do you trust, who don't you trust.
Best thing that people can do is practice. Just send money around, see how it works.
Buy a very small amount of Bitcoin so that you have a little toe in the water. It changes you.
Find a way to contribute to the revolution that Bitcoin is. You have some kind of unique skills. I'm a developer, you're a filmmaker. Somehow Bitcoin makes use of our skills and creates a synergy. There is something for everyone.
Without the success of Bitcoin, financing war will continue, posing an existential threat to the entire species. So I consider Bitcoin as of the utmost necessity for the survival of the human race. I think the stakes are that high. I, for one, along with many others, in a large sense, devoted my life to helping see that through, at least so that the next generation can pick up where we left off, to not drop the ball and leave them hopeless. I think that there's an enormous battle coming, dare I say war, for the future of money. War is like turning a dark corner, doing your best to see 3 feet in front of your face. It's risky, it's dangerous, it's uncertain, but you know where you want to be. My hope is that the struggle does not claim the freedom and lives of countless wonderful, beautiful people. It's up to the creators, the cypherpunks and the coders and everybody to join the fight, which in this case is not literally fighting. It's just taking responsibility for your own life. That's fighting. Now, that's how you fight this war. You want to be a soldier, you want to help win for yourself, for your children, for all of humanity. You want to help win. The number one thing that you can do, perhaps the only thing that you can do, is to opt out. Get some Bitcoin and hang on to it. You are benefiting yourself, and through that process, helping a new economic reality based on a Bitcoin standard.
Our nature is a choice. That's what being an intelligent species involves.
Let's change the behavior. How does the behavior change? Your mindset. Well, how does your mindset change? Well, you got to take a pause and have silence. See where you're standing. Times are a-changing. Don't be afraid of it. Innovate right through it.